Siblings and sisters and brothers, welcome to Tuesdays for Nurture. It is so good to be together today. Tuesdays for Nurture is a program where we faithfully focus on education for the people of God. Our topics are wide-ranging, from things like faith-filled politics to interviews of key leaders to how-tos in congregational life and the impacts of current realities on the life of the church. And each conversation will feature clear suggestions on what you can do to change the church and the world towards the world that God imagines for all of us. Today, we're going to amp that all the way up. So first, we're looking together at the youngest of these in our congregations and in our world, and how leaders in the UCC have equipped their congregations and the families within them to focus on the babies and far beyond. So we're going to be talking about beyond the children's moments and children's ministry today. So here to introduce the esteemed panelists is Reverend Julie Yarborough, the chair of the Association of Christian Educators and the pastor at Christ Church UCC in Summit, New Jersey. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here today. I'm delighted to be a part of this discussion. As Chris said, I am the chair of the Association of United Church Educators. It's a group of UCC Christian educators, both clergy and lay, volunteer and paid, who work together to network, share resources, and serve as an advocate for children and youth and families with the United Church of Christ. So we provide voice without vote at Synod, and we are representative of all people working for Christian education in the UCC churches across the country. I am delighted to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Reverend Cynthia Wally-Hoger. She has served full-time in children, youth, and young adult ministries for over 15 years, and she currently serves as Associate Pastor of Children, Youth, and Families of First Congregational Church of Los Angeles. Welcome, Wally.
Hi, everyone.
Next, we have Ashley Adams. Ashley is the Director of Faith Formation at the Seymour Congregational Church in Seymour, Connecticut.
Thanks for having me, Julie. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Glad to have you with us today. Karma Cloud joins us from Montclair, New Jersey, where she's the Director of Christian Education at First Congregational Church. Welcome, Karma.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
And Tom Martinez, who is the Senior Pastor at Desert Palm UCC in Tempe, Arizona.
Hi, Julie. Hi, everybody. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us today, Tom, and all of the rest of the panelists. Chris?
So Julie and I are going to be co-moderating in some ways, and we've thought really carefully about how do we get all sorts of information about children's ministry today to all of you. So before we start, let me say clearly, you are going to get an email of all of these resources afterwards, or if you're watching us on YouTube, it's going to be below the description of the video as here on YouTube. So don't worry, what we're talking about and what you're seeing, you're going to get a list thereafter. Additionally, this is being recorded and we will have that available for you afterwards too. So to begin, we are so happy to be here with each one of these leaders. And even as we go, I know that questions are going to come from our audience, and we've structured some time to engage them at the end of our hour-long conversation. So you can, we'll put instructions about how to do that in there too. Having said that, I want to start us off with a little bit of fun. We called this Beyond the Children's Moment. And the children's moment is often that moment in worship where the children are most visible to the whole of the congregation. But as everyone here knows, that is not the only way we do children's ministry. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I'm curious if there are any memorable children's moments that come to your mind to get us going. And I'm going to invite Reverend Karma to go first.
Well, for me, the most memorable part of the children's moment is when I ask the children to look into their bright and shining eyes. And I literally go one by one and we make eye contact. And certainly before, that's something I miss from the before times, is making that eye contact.
Whenever you're ready. Anyone else thinking of a moment, of a children's moment, whether digital or from the before, that you want to lift into the conversation? Go ahead, Ashley.
From the before, I do very much enjoy having my microphone stolen by small humans. But I think one of my favorite moments was when a little boy referred to frankincense as Frankenstein. That was so innocent and so sweet.
Well, it's less of the goofy, but it's something that I always love to share. It's like one of my favorite children's messages, and it's worked, thankfully, both in the before times and with us doing all virtual worship. And that's to do like body prayer. And the words always kind of change and the movements kind of change depending on what we're doing in the moment. But for example, like flowing with the winds of change and reaching up to spread joy for others. And even like the adults have been getting into it, which is really cool to see their feedback during our virtual worships as well.
How about you, Tom? You want to add in?
I've heard, like 1,000 amazing children's stories. And of course, right now, I can't remember one.
No worries. I'm always thinking about how often in those moments, there's the way we teach them to pray too. In the churches I've been at, it's been like, okay, we're going to do a repeat after me prayer. Dear God, and they all go into it, and how that continues to work in the after times is what came to mind for me.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that reminds me that Michael Land, who was our religious educator for many years, just moved back east to Florida. She used to begin the prayer time during the children's moment by inviting everybody to take a breath. And every week I would sit there thinking, this is probably the only time we all stop and contemplate our breathing and just take a breath. It felt so important every week.
Chris, we're pre-recording our worship services, and one of my favorite things has been inviting families to do the children's message and allowing them to do them with their children in our pre-recorded service. And so our kids are helping to lead the worship in that way.
I love that. So we've acknowledged the children's moment, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the, I come from Connecticut. So, I'm going to say the meat and potatoes of the work we're going to do, and that's reflective of my own upbringing. When you think, I'm thinking especially about to Wally and to Ashley, when you think about how you framed your work in this time as a minister for children, what are some things that come to mind in terms of how you've imagined doing this?
Yeah, so in ways it's different, and then there's ways that it's the same, right? I think this has really forced me to take a moment to say, what's really important here? Like, what are we doing? And how are we supporting our families? How are we supporting our kids? And when I looked at what we wanted to offer for our families, the answer was spiritual practices. So looking at ways we could fold even just a simple prayer practice into their daily lives or their weekly schedules, trying to find ways to open up new experiences for them and letting families create their own kind of new traditions. I think there was like both overwhelm and boredom at the same time. So it's like there was some opportunities there of families saying like, what can we do together as a family to help do this work of faith formation?
That's wonderful, Wally. And going off the family note, you couldn't hold Sunday school once the pandemic started. So we started to hold family Sunday school to allow the parents to be the one teaching their children, near their children, to help with crafts rather than us leaning over their children and not following safety guidelines. So I think really including the whole family has kind of been the shift for this pandemic, and really meeting people where they are. Like you said, I think the struggle in the beginning was learning how to do Zoom, and now it's learning how to prevent Zoom burnout. These poor kids are on Zoom constantly. And I think for us to find new ways to reach them is really important.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting to look at the different waves of Zoom fatigue. So it was like what school was like last spring and dealing with that level of Zoom fatigue. And then I remember when we came back in the fall and kids were having like 6 hours, 8 hours on Zoom. And they were just like, no, we're not. So we had to try and make sure we had options for our kids and families offline, like doing our boxes and mailing it to them and just really telling them like, it's okay. You don't have to log on to Zoom to be a part of our faith community. Like we want to meet you where you are. So yeah, I hear that too.
And we struggled in the beginning trying to get supplies to our students, right? You plan this great lesson for church school and your kids don't have the supplies to participate. So we finally figured out to send supplies home monthly. So each kid gets a packet so they can do it on their own time or they can do it with us for the lesson, which has been really wonderful, just to kind of stop that Zoom burnout and have the kids engaged.
I'd like to follow that up by asking Karma, how do you create a sense of belonging for your children and families online while respecting the need for families to use the weekend as a break from being online? Just like Ashley and Wally have said, a lot of families have expressed a desire to do things that are not online. And how do you manage that at your church?
One way is through my newsletter, which also it shares resources with them that they can do during the week, kind of like sending the supply boxes home. But something else that I really have loved doing are connection calls. So I invite parents to sign up for a connection call. It can be just a phone call. It sometimes is a Zoom, but it's on their own time. And it's just that family rather than having to have the whole grid of everyone. And we can really hone in on what's going on with them. And it's just a nicer pace. And, that connection, that connective tissue is activated there. So that's what I really enjoy.
Thank you, Karma. You also mentioned to me something about KISS. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Right. KISS means keep it sane, simple, and sustainable. And that is like less is more, so I don't try to jam too much into my Sunday school sessions either, because when they do come, they actually just like to talk and see each other and have time for that check-in. They love doing artwork. So I just try to 1-2 things and that's it, and that's enough.
That's great. That's such a word of wisdom for all of us to keep it simple during this time. Sometimes I think we try to figure out what else can we do? What can we do that's more creative than last week? And
right.
And sometimes it's important just to slow down and simplify.
One other thing I'll just add is that I sometimes shift my location. So I've gone to like streams and nature and outside where so they'll have that as their background and we listen to the water live. And so that's another thing that I bring in, natural elements.
That's great. And what a wonderful idea to mix it up a little bit and change your surroundings, and that keeps it fresh for everyone.
Definitely.
Tom, as a senior pastor, how have you prioritized space for the youngest of your congregation?
Most recently, we've been thinking a lot about intergenerational kinds of things and spiritual formation at every stage of the life cycle, and really intentionally thinking about, how our elders need the energy of the young kids and vice versa. So to try to facilitate that, we've been following, instead of going by the lectionary, we're using the Sunday school curriculum to get our gospel readings on any given Sunday. So we've been coordinating. So the idea is, when you think of pre-pandemic, a family going home in the car and the kids, the youth, the adults have all experienced the same story. And so they have something similar to talk about, a shared experience. So that's what we've been trying to do. We, of course, it generally works, although the other week we had our staff meeting and it was early in Lent, and we realized Palm Sunday was the kids' lesson that Sunday. And we're like, well, that's not going to work. But the adults have been really receptive and flexible and easygoing about it. I thought, I'd be like, how dare you not follow the lectionary? But Everybody was cool with it, and actually the children's stories and we're using the Shine curriculum. They're very similar, to the lectionary, but not always exactly the same. But nobody seems to care. Everybody likes the idea of us all thinking about the same stories together.
I love the fact that you're doing some intergenerational ministry at your church. And I'm wondering if some of the other participants on our panel are also doing some intergenerational programming. Wally? I think
Well, our big thing that we're doing right now, our larger than life tree. We built a Lenten tree. I took this idea from someone who did this for Epiphany, and we built this, I think it's 15 foot high. It's just enormous tree throughout this season of Lent, and all ages. So we're really, encouraging adults and not just the kids and youth are mailing in the leaves and flowers. And we have like prompts each week throughout Lent for them to give us, what's something that they want to let go of, an old idea, or what are some new ideas they want to incorporate. And so each week leading up to Easter, when we'll have butterflies that will kind of fall from the ceiling. And so that's been a great visual thing, part of worship, but also a way to get everyone engaged.
We really enjoy highlighting the children during worship. So we're now live streaming, but we have pre-recorded children's messages that are skits that the children put on. So that they did skits through Advent, and now they're doing skits through Lent. And I think it's really important that the congregation get to see their younger generation at work doing God's word.
And as a national staff member, it is incumbent upon me to remind you that when children are featured in worship, that all of the appropriate permissions are gained and such, so that safe church policy happens online too. So I do want to say that part out loud, even as we continue to feature them as much as possible in conversation with their adults. So are you ready for a game? Okay, so we're going to try a little game, partially because I know that each of these panelists and Julie brings so much wisdom about what's happening now, that I want to see how many of these examples we can get out there so that we can dive deeper together. So how this is going to work, this is going to be rapid fire children's ministry. And we're going to go in this order. Karma, then Ashley, then Wally, then Tom, then Julie. I'm going to ask, what's one thing that you've done over the last year that was fun, that worked, that had engagement, that you might want to talk about or revisit or go back to or remember fondly? What you're going to do is answer briefly without much explanation, just enough so people have a sense of what's going on. And you can all unmute. This will be a fun little chaos. We're going to answer briefly. I hit my own bingo today. And then we're going to go in a rapid fire and come back with any follow-up questions. So starting with Karma, I'm not going to interject in between, just go right in order. What's one thing that you've done over the past year that was super exciting, that worked, that you remember fondly? And go.
Adding an art gallery into the newsletter.
Living Nativity for Christmas Eve.
Our parent support group on Zoom before worship.
We had our kids sing Holly, Holly, Holly as a postlude, different video clips.
Family Sunday School using Growing in God's Love Story Bible.
Back to me. Okay. I really loved when we had the nativity scene and everyone had their own homemade nativity scene, the kids and the family. Legos, cardboard.
Yard visits.
Playing Among Us with our youth group.
We had our youth say the Lord's Prayer and pre-recorded that. And so when we got to that part of the service, it was all of a sudden, kids and youth saying the Lord's Prayer.
Halloween party in the parking lot.
Keep going. We have game night where we do great scavenger hunts.
we're going to go as long as we have things to go with, and then I'm going to circle back to where we have questions. Keep going.
Zoom sweet and sour weekly reviews.
Breathe like a bear, 30 mindful moments for kids to feel calm, focused. These have some great things in here.
We have a tradition of using puppets, and it's being revived.
Holy troublemakers and unconventional saints.
Reading from the Children of God Storybook Bible by Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Family nights and movie nights.
Making graham cracker Jesus reenactment with blue frosting and teddy graham crackers. Teddy bear graham crackers.
That's all I've got.
All right. Anyone else want to add any final things before I kind of come back to some questions?
Interactive art installation on the front lawn.
Ooh, so our goal was to get you watching as many ideas as possible. And I want to kind of pick up on some of what you all have said. Can you speak, Ashley, a little bit more about the parents group, the parent support group that you were running? Was that you?
Wally's running the parent support group. I run the family night.
Wally first.
So we just wanted to create something that was easy and very short. So it's only 30 minutes and it's a part of our Sunday morning schedule. So we go and it's the first thing so that parents can drop in, and usually we all have coffee and we check in on how things went. Usually we also talk about what's going on with schools and all of those kinds of things. And it's really open-ended, but by keeping it short, we've actually had people come every single week and throughout this whole pandemic, which is crazy to think that anything's been consistent. And then we also try to match up same age parents. So sometimes we'll have more younger parents of younger kids or whatever, but really it's been a great time for them to connect. It's like coffee hour, but before church and with parents only. And I should say that's on Zoom. Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you, but that was on Zoom, just so people know.
I want to ask again, now actually back to Ashley, and sorry about that. You said sweet and sour, but what is that?
So sweets and sours is what our church school kids decided to call our highs and lows, or our joys and our concerns. When I came, they were calling it joys and concerns, which is kind of an adult term. So we had the kids pick their they pick their words that they wanted to use. So we came with sweets and sours. So every Sunday we get together on Zoom and we get to talk about the best parts of our week and the hard parts of our week and just goof around and have a really nice time. And we invite the pastor and we invite the Sunday school teachers that the kids used to see and now don't see, unfortunately.
Thank you. So, Karma, you have spoken about this newsletter. It's been an art gallery. It's been all sorts of different things, but can you speak a little bit more about what goes in that newsletter?
Sure. And recently I revamped it so that it used to be weekly, and now actually it happens just on the first Sunday and the last Sunday. So it's juicier, it's more substantial, and you get to see more sort of, the overview. So the art gallery is one thing that I added, where I just really stack it with all the artwork so that I name the children, the children can look forward to looking in it. I want it to be a place where both the children and the parents go to feel recognized, to feel special, to read things together. I have lots of links from the month that we share together to keep the conversation going at home. And I have the birthday box where we give shout outs. I put names and photographs of the kids, and I have a little video playing Stevie Wonder's version of Happy Birthday to them. So that's a little bit about the newsletter.
Thank you. Ooh. So we have a question from the audience about, particularly about safe church policy and how that's enacted in these digital times. As always, we recommend that you look to the insurance board for safe church questions. And how has that been enacted in your settings? Anybody willing to speak to this? Go ahead, Ashley.
Well, we just made sure that our sweets and sours, where you saw the kids, was going to be very private, and that's on Zoom. And we have our kind of church school lesson on our Facebook Live and on our YouTube page, with participation from the audience, with comments and things like that. But we don't talk who the kids are and things like that. They're on their parents' Facebook pages and things like that. So that's how we made sure it was two separate things to kind of protect our children.
I think the biggest challenge for us has been, we try on Sunday mornings to have one bucket of time. It's going to be all of our kids together, which is kindergarten, preschool to sixth grade. And then we also have one chunk of our time where they're divided out by age groups. And so that was something that really came to our mind about the safe church policy, which is, you have to have two adults, non-related adults, that have passed, all the background checks and have done all of these things. So trying to maybe pivot on Sunday morning if you have a volunteer or you don't, or things, just making sure that you have that coverage when you're doing your breakout rooms. So I think that was the hardest thing. And then it would kind of dictate how many groups we could divide into based off of how many volunteers we had to make sure that we were covering those bases.
Yeah, for me, the parents are very much involved. It's kind of more like family Sunday school, honestly, during the pandemic. So we're always having the adults either participating fully or right there, with us. And then, of course, we have all of, people who sign off and give permission for when I'm using their pictures and their artwork in the newsletter, for example, or when they're speaking as part of a live service. Or recorded, pre-recorded as well.
We also have a question from the audience about curriculum. And I know, I think Tom and Karma, you're both using the same curriculum. Tom, do you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, we're using Shine. I think I put a link in the resources. We've been pretty happy with it. It was chosen by our outgoing coordinator who, was looking, comparing, investigating curriculums, and she had settled upon that one. We're pretty, progressive congregation, and so sometimes we, are looking for approaches, lessons that feel inclusive and kind of, opening up the power of the lesson as opposed to narrowing down. And so we've been pretty happy with Shine, and they have lots of related resources to help the teachers, and it's definitely designed for in-person, so we've had to do some tweaks there.
Thanks, Tom. Karma, can you say a word about why you like that curriculum as well?
I like the stories. I feel like they're accessible to the children. I do definitely go back and forth, though. I use this a lot for my stories. The Children of God Storybook Bible by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It's a little more multicultural to me in the imagery, but they're both very useful. The Shine one is good because it really follows along, with the church calendar, and I can easily find things. There's not as much in the other storybook Bible, but so I kind of go back and forth in between, back and forth.
Thanks. Ashley and Wally, are you all using any particular curriculum? Anything that you can suggest?
Well, I love Spark House materials, all things Spark House. They have lots of different models that they use. And so if you just go to Spark House website and you can find a lot of different good stuff there. And when we went to the pandemic, model, I actually started doing godly play, which is something I've always wanted to do. And I was trained a million years ago, but I wanted some immersive storytelling. And so the godly play materials are perfect for that. They're based off of the Montessori style teaching, but that's what we use for our together time with all ages. We do singing and godly play stories over Zoom.
I agree with Wally with the Spark. It is wonderful. We use the rotation, the different workshops. So we'll stick with a lesson for a month and then rotate through the science, the art, the cooking. And that way kids can learn the way that they learn best, right? We're not just sticking with crafts or games the whole time. But during the pandemic, we actually found a website called Teach Sunday School. Very simple. And it sends out church school lessons that are topical to what's going on in the month. Holidays. We just talked about the women in the Bible to talk about Women's History Month. So it's been a lot of fun to be topical and not just strictly biblical.
And I'd like to give a shout out to Illustrated Ministry for their Vacation Bible School curriculum. We used it last summer and they have a new one coming out this year. And it was actually used by everyone in our congregation, not just children. We did an intergenerational type programming. We've also used this Growing in God's Love Story Bible by Elizabeth Caldwell and Carol Wareheim. And they have questions that we can send out to everybody. So we do that together.
I know so many of you want to know much more about curriculums, and this is all information that you can access through Aussie. So just know that the reviews, who's done it, who's beside it, is all information through the Association of United Christian Educators. And Julie will there is going to be information that we've talked about that's going to be sent out or below the YouTube video if you're watching us thereafter. So do know that we will compile all of this and the suggestions that you've all mentioned. Having said that, I want to bring in a question from the audience about how are we holding and teaching our children about racism, white privilege, justice, and injustice now?
Anyone can jump in on this one? Are you asking a specific person? Okay.
We're
Well,
asking everyone to be engaging
okay.
these materials.
Yes.
And if you are ready to speak into them, you are welcome.
Awesome. So one thing I really have enjoyed was connecting Lent with the wilderness, Jesus's time in the wilderness and temptation, and actually creating a correlation between racism being the temptation, that we are tempted to believe the lies of racism. And how do we avoid that? How do we avoid falling into that trap of believing those lies? So we read The Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram X. Kendi, and we went through all those really, again, simple, sane, sustainable suggestions about how to do so, from celebrate our cultural differences to blame policies, not people, to don't judge a book by its cover, to see all skin colors. And we went through each one, and instead of thinking about what are we giving up for Lent, we thought about what are the ways in which we can work towards being an anti-racist baby, and chose 3 of the suggestions from his list as what the children were going to work on during Lent to improve their awareness of their own privileges and how they can strengthen themselves against the violence of racism as well.
I will also name that if you are serving a congregation in the United Church of Christ that is predominantly or only people who identify as white, other resources include Raising White Kids by Jennifer Harvey. That's an excellent resource. And it would be a really good idea to do an audit of the ways in which your congregation shows how and who is in leadership. So if you can walk around your sanctuary and see what kind of pictures are on the wall and what kind of stories they tell and what kind of families are represented, especially as we've had a break from the sanctuaries, as you go back to refresh those billboards, Notice who is on them. What do they depict? What stories do they tell the children in your congregation without speaking a word? Anyone else want to hop in? Before we go to Julie and another question? Go ahead, Wally.
Our church is located in downtown Los Angeles. And so there was a lot of, children and youth who were directly affected by burning buildings and, riots, and were involved in Black Lives Matter, and I think the most helpful thing that we've done throughout this whole time has been giving them space to talk about it, to really not shy away from the topic, even with our littlest ones, finding ways to talk about racism and race, and really setting the tone like it's not a taboo. You don't have to be afraid to talk about these things. And I'm not sure that I got it right all the time. Sometimes it was messy, but we really tried to lean in hard to let them process their feelings as we've gone through not just this pandemic, but awakening in our culture.
I'll also be offering a parent series this month that started last week with the our parent support circle, because to help parents talk with their kids about race. So a lot of the links that I share in the newsletter are about helping them to start and continue the conversation that we start in Sunday school, and just through connection calls actually was able to feel like there was a deeper need to go deeper into these conversations and support our parents who are of many different ethnicities in different ways. So we're going to do a 4-week journey to explore that, 2 sessions that are just with parents and 2 sessions that includes the whole family together.
I love that, Karma. And I love the idea of doing that with families together. And Wally, I love what you said about as a white person, not always getting it right, but how important it is to do it anyway. I think that's a really, really great thing to keep in mind. We had a chance to participate in a town-wide funeral procession for George Floyd that went past all of the different houses of worship. And it was really wonderful to have children, youth, and adults from our congregation gather on our front lawn next to our Black Lives Matter banners, but also kneeling for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as the cars drove past. It was a really profound moment. And it really, I think it was really important for our children as well as for our adults to participate in that.
I might also add, many of our members are doing trainings on their own. And so I also share different trainings in my newsletter that they can do. Myself, I like the Racial Healing Allies. I've been doing work with her for over a year now. So I think it's important to keep sharing the resources.
Karma, to the question of your newsletter, is that a newsletter that you send that is specific for your congregation? Or is that a news? Yes. All right. I want to be very clear about that because there's been some requests from this audience.
Great.
That is a suggestion about how you can structure a similar newsletter for your congregations.
Yes.
Not to get into Karma's.
So well, you can access it. You can access it on First Congregational Church's Facebook, because a little social post goes to our Facebook page, and that will, so in that way, I guess it is open to beyond that, but it is emailed to just the congregation.
Great. So a link to the Facebook page will also be in the resources.
Okay.
From here, all esteemed panelists, I want to let you know there are so many questions and excitement coming in about various pieces of what you are doing and how you are doing it. If you can, check out some of those questions. Speaking directly to the panelists, check out some of those questions. You can type some answers, and we're going to go around in the same order that we did for the rapid fire. And I'm going to invite you to pick a question and answer it. And you can click the little thing that says answer live. So we know which one you want to pick. So having said that, when you are ready, Karma, go for it. Everybody's perusing. Let me also take this opportunity as folks are looking to let you know that this has been a recorded conversation, and it can be shared out. It can be shared out with anyone who is doing children's ministry or intergenerational ministry or holding space in this particular way for folks within and beyond our congregations.
I'll start by talking about the interactive art installation we had on our front lawn. It was actually in relation to the number of COVID deaths in New Jersey back in November, which at that time was 16,000. And we had an artist in our congregation create a piece of artwork that we then invited the whole community to participate in by adding their prayers to it, by tying them onto chicken wire. And it was very effective.
I also want to just mention there's a lot of questions about, this book or that book, and we really have we try to compile everything we're going to talk about. So there's going to be great resources in there, but also I forgot to mention Facebook groups. So that is a great place to collaborate and get ideas and ask questions and all of the things. And I compiled I think 5 of my favorite groups with children and youth ministries. Those are different things. And I highly encourage you to go join those and ask your questions there and share things. I'm a big believer in collaboration. So it's where I get all my good ideas, is from others.
I'd also like to encourage you to check out the Aussie website, which is aussie-ucc.org. And there's tons of resources and networking on there.
I'll answer the question. I'm finding parents are burned out from trying to do their jobs and organize their kids' schooling and taking care of aging parents. Any suggestions? KISS. Keep it simple, sane, and sustainable. And I'll share one specific thing that actually I didn't do, but my colleague, Reverend John Rogers, recently did with his youth ministry, which is they have walking partners. And so, so they've started to go on walks, walk and talk, and social distance. And so that's something. And then, through my connection calls have been really helpful in relation to this issue, because sometimes people just need someone to listen one-to-one. And we've, I really say, what is it about? It's about anything. You want to pray together, we'll pray together. You want to be quiet together, we'll be quiet together. You want to sing, whatever they need to do. But it's also a time when I can listen in and suggest, well, are you breathing? Are you doing any mindfulness activities with the kids at dinner or at breakfast? It's about finding the little spaces and realizing there's so much in there when you just commune with your breath. And you take a moment of communion in between the spaces. And sometimes people just need that reminder and someone to breathe with them, I find, into those moments.
Somebody asked about engaging with volunteers, and they talked about there was a gap between the last person in charge and themselves. I can relate to that. I started a month before the world shut down. So I didn't really get to learn and know my Sunday school teachers, my volunteers, very well. But we invite them every week to our Zoom Sweet and Sour. And normally their sweets is seeing those kids' faces. And I think the kids really feel kind of special when somebody is excited to see them, and the kids are excited to see the teachers as well. So we kind of keep them involved that way. Unfortunately, it's a little more difficult to have them teach Sunday school lessons. Passwords need to be shared to Facebook pages and things like that. So just to have them on the Zoom calls with the kids has been really great.
There was a question about what's being sent out in the supply boxes, and I'd love to maybe figure out how to put maybe some of those resources on our shared page. But what we generally do is we try to plan out 6 weeks in advance. I'd love to do 2 months at a time, but usually it ends up being six weeks. And then that gives us time to send it out. And so we'll plan out whatever those activities will be. So maybe, like I just mentioned, I could not tell you how successful this using blue frosting on a graham cracker and these teddy bears to reenact Jesus's baptism was so successful. But that would be an example, and we would put in there the graham crackers, the frosting that's made blue, and the sprinkles, and we would give all of the supplies possible for said activity, and then it's kind of just they can take it and do what they want. And it's hard for our littlest ages. I've kind of been working with our preschool parents because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like all of these are terrible, like for little kids. So the parents have also been augmenting the supplies to match maybe what their needs are. And so, but once you have multiple options, like I feel like for our parents, it's less pressure. If I miss that week or I need something to do with my kids to keep them busy, I'll go into that box and then, you know, sometimes they'll do it early or whatever. But yeah, that's the idea behind it. And then we include instructions with pictures so that, again, they don't have to be online. They don't have to be there to know what to do with their paintbrushes, et cetera.
I could jump in on what do you offer for kids online? I was curious about that myself. And so I went on our website just now and I see that one thing we have is a place for families to sign up who are interested in participating in family activities with kids of any age. And it's just kind of a user-friendly, easy way to sign up and get connected. And then just a nice overview with a few friendly graphics that show kids of different ages and talking about the programming that we have. That's Desert Palm in Tempe, which is outside Phoenix.
I'm seeing one now directed to me. Karma, what are you using to lead that family series? Well, in addition to directing Christian Ed, I also have my own business and I do something called Ubuntu Education. And that is rooted in expressive arts practice as well as racial healing allies now and African spirituality and indigenous earth-based spirituality. So we are going to be, we're going to be really starting with two concepts. One that is the concept of asili, which is a Pan-African term, which means collective cultural consciousness. And it really, for me, is the infinite affirmation, especially of a people who have been oppressed, and to constantly rebirth themselves, and how important it is to have that we shall overcome mentality when facing racism and building up your immunity. I call it your inner emotional immunity to that. And then also Ubuntu, South African cultural concept. I am because we are. So I firmly believe that strengthening a family's cultural consciousness about who they are, because so often racism eradicates all of our ethnicities. And when we don't know who we are, then we can fall prey to who we are not. So we're going to start really there to root ourselves and our reason for being. And then we're going to go to what we did in Sunday school, which is the anti-racist baby, keeping it simple, sane, and sustainable, to create a family action plan with their children based on these really simple 9 steps. And that's what we're going to do. Less is more.
We will not have time to get to all of the questions that are coming from our audience. They are all amazing questions to ask in these Facebook groups. So when you get that, note that anything you asked here, if it's universal, can also be asked there, and you're going to get several people responding with engagement, ideas, encouragement, and beyond. We will make sure all these resources are included. I want to ask each of the panelists as a final question. In our pre-conversations, some of what came up was this awareness of re-entry and the impact on children. So as we are engaging those conversations, which will continue to be difficult, let me say that, those conversations of how do we come back together will continue to be difficult for all of the leaders. What tips do you have when you're centering children in that conversation? If you're ready to offer anything, go for it. or even acknowledgement of how hard it is. You know, sometimes it feels like we're in the wilderness trying to figure out the way when the information is coming from so many different places.
Breathe and take it slow.
Yeah, I think recognizing that we've been through a collective trauma together, you know, and kind of keeping that trauma recovery model in mind, that people need to talk about what they've been through. They need to hear stories. They need to know that what they're feeling is understandable and that a lot of people are feeling the same way. So kind of modeling, you know, transparency and recognizing just how strange it's been and how good it feels, you know, anticipating getting back together. But we're definitely thinking in terms of the next few years being just a general time of recovery and healing, and really kind of stepping back to recognize that, you know, we've just really begun to wrap our brains around, you know, what we've been through, what we're going through.
I think it's going to be a balance where we recognize what we've been through, but we also encourage the future, right? We encourage them to have fun, to breathe, but we're also allowing, you know, we have separate supplies. You don't have to worry about the virus and keeping safe. You know, we create that space for them where they are allowed to have fun and they don't have to worry.
Even now, I remind them that they don't have to participate, especially with the Zoom space. I know that we're talking about getting back in person, but just, again, being mindful of the anxiety to perform, the anxiety to do things right. So I'm always sort of just restating, it's okay to pass, you know, you don't have to answer. You can just be with us right now. It's really important.
You know, I think for us in our space in downtown LA, in our cathedral space, it's a lot easier for us to think about how to re-engage adults, you know, and even easier to think about engaging vaccinated adults. And I feel like right now I just have lots of questions. Like, what does a nursery look like? Like, when could we open a nursery? What is going to be our society when we get to that point? And so I think for me, I'm just trying to learn to sit in the moment that is right now and pay attention to what's going around me with schools. I know a lot of us are just watching what others are doing and allowing myself to not know, because it's just really hard to plan our fall, our, you know, Advent season. What does that look like? And I have no idea. But I know that getting to connect with other faith formers and youth leaders and ministers is really important. So I'm grateful for this and also all the other spaces that are like this online right now, so that we can not have to be doing this alone.
I heard from one of my sisters yesterday, and she was saying how her little one, my nibbling, who is 5, was getting to the hybrid stage where they live. And what she told him was, everybody's had a hard year. Just give people lots of chances. And I was like, oh, that's true. May I remember that. Everybody's had a hard year. Let's give each other so many chances. Oh, so from there, I want to say, if this has been helpful for you, if there have been pieces in this that you can cling to and hold on to for hope or utilize in your settings, please consider donating to the national setting of the United Church of Christ's annual fund by texting UCC to 41444. I also want to let you know about a couple of things that are upcoming before we pray into the rest of our day. That is, on Thursday of this week, we will be joined for a Lenten hour of prayers and reflections, really thinking about where we are and how we can be in prayer with each other collectively, nationally right now, given all of this. On March 16th, a week from today, we're going to be talking together about the doctrine of discovery and specifically how that has impacted Hawaii. So for those of you who we get one narrative, and there's so many more pieces that are not often included. So to learn more about Pacific Asian Islander and particularly Indigenous the Hawaiians from their own voices, the doctrine of discovery and the impact there, we'll be talking about that a week from today. And finally, I have to mention that Thursday next, on March 18th, led by me and many other people, we will be having a Celtic worship expression, and we will dive deep into what that is and what that can be, with the merging of this Celtic worship with the music and being together in my own cultural expression of who I am and my ethnic identity too. So join us in all of that. It's all coming to you via email as well. If you've signed up for one, you're going to get emails about all of them, and you can find them on ucc.org, just going to the homepage, scrolling all the way down the page, and you'll see little calendar invitations. And we would love to be together with all of you. So with gratitude for each one of the folk on this panel, for the moments where you have spoken into wisdom, for the moments where you have let space for someone else to. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And to the team here at the United Church of Christ in the background making this happen, always gratitude for each one of you. And in closing, if you would join us all in prayer as led by Reverend Julie, please let us pray into the rest of our day. And with joy, I will see you on Thursday.
Thank you, Chris and Jennifer and all the rest at the UCC National Office who made this possible. Let's be together in a time of prayer. Holy One, we give you thanks for all those who participate in and with the ministries of working with children and youth and families across our denomination. We give you thanks for creative ideas, for the sharing of resources and networking that takes place across the UCC. Inspire us to find new ways to be messengers of your love, agents of your peace, and partners for the work of justice in this world. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Siblings and sisters and brothers in Christ, if this conversation has moved you, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or your soul, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed into the rest of your day and know that you are not alone, and we are holding you in prayer. Amen.